Hello and welcome back to the Comic Lyra podcast. I'm Ryan, also known as Comic Stan. I love comic books, my co-host loves regular books, and I make him read comic books, and then we talk about them in depth. And with me, as always, is my aforementioned world co-host, it's Jamie.
Hello and welcome to the Comic Lyra podcast, the podcast where... I was trying to do a spiral.
I thought you were going to go, like, because of last week, I thought you were going to be like, I memorized it now, because we had that tiff last week.
No, I was just doing the little spiral thing. It was like a bit.
I kind of get where you're coming from. That the word world turns out a description of spiraled things.
Yeah.
And it's the close. I didn't know this beforehand. It's a mathematical term. Didn't know it beforehand. But apparently it has something to do with...
Whirly-girlies.
Past tense, spiral or move in a twisted and convoluted fashion. And speaking of convoluted, we're doing Uzumaki this week. The horror manga. I've been wanting to do Junji Ito for a while because I am a fan of his horrific drawings, is probably the best way to put it. And it's spooky season. Spooky season.
I wait all fucking year.
Okay, all right. And it's spooky season.
Thank you.
You are. Second week of spooky season, and I thought this was a great opportunity as well because this has recently been made into an anime series.
Has it?
It has. It's actually had several adaptations in different ways, which we'll get to at the end because I think it'll be a fun little tack on at the end. But
I would love to see the Tim Burton adaptation of this with Johnny Depp as the dad.
Why you got to make it bad? Why you got to ruin it?
Because it would be awful, and I'd love it.
I get the chaotic energy to make things bad and worse. But when you say Tim Burton and Johnny Depp, I'm like, you've gone too far, mate.
Well, isn't that everything Tim Burton ever made, though? Isn't Johnny Depp just in all of his stuff?
His thing is more like, oh, look how gothic I am. Like, that's him, isn't it? I think he lost the plot a bit, Tim Burton, creatively.
Helena Bonham Carter left him.
Well, that probably. But also when he started incorporating CGI. I think that was a bad choice for his kind of stuff because his stuff works better as practical effects. Like, I really like Beetlejuice from back in the day. Nightmare Before Christmas, everyone loves. And I
really like Edward Scissorhands.
Yep, very big favorite.
Have you seen Ed Wood?
No, it's one I've known about for a while. Apparently it's really good, yeah.
So when I was at uni, way back when, I actually realised the other day that I finished uni over a decade ago. Like, I finished over a decade ago.
Don't think about it.
Don't think about it.
Push the feelings down.
Push the feelings down until you die. And
yes.
Yes.
It's not a joke, folks.
No, but a bunch of my friends did a B-movie class. Like, it was a whole class about the conventions of B-movies. I think maybe they were in like the cinema part, like they weren't doing English.
That like the British version of like the AV club.
Yeah, or it was like it was like a cinema elective that you could take on top of an English degree, and maybe I was doing some history stuff at the time.
Right.
I don't know. But they got to do a class where they watched a bunch of B movies, and some of them were Ed Wood films. So they watched Plan 9 from Outer Space and Glenn and Glenda.
Is B movie correct for that? Like, I don't know, but I thought B movie was like straight to DVD kind of thing. Weren't the Ed Wood films like famously bad? So they wouldn't be like several rungs lower than B.
That's what they called them at the time.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know enough about it.
I'm asking the wrong person.
Fair enough. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm not. I
don't know either. So we're in the same boat.
I was having this conversation with someone the other day, and I realized that I like pretty classy films. Like, I was chatting with a bunch of people in a work training group, which is about as close to a cross-section of society as you'll ever get. And
how does everyone feel about Uzumaki here? Junji Ito fans? Anyone?
And there's just that one, like, slightly overweight anime nerd grunting in the corner with a neck beard, and he's like, I love Junji Ito. That's me.
I felt like that was a personal attack on me, but go on.
No, you don't grunt.
I'm the most eloquent anime fan. I barely watch anime, but I'm the most eloquent comic book fans you'll ever find. Go on.
They've got a body pillow on there beside them at their desk.
What's the waifu?
Waifu pillow.
Get it right. Come on.
Yeah. Sorry.
Respect the culture.
Well, no, and we were talking about our favorite films and stuff, and I was talking about stuff like Amelie.
Can I guess your favorite? Would you say Amelie's your favorite film?
No, I don't have a favorite anything because I think superlatives are silly. But
I think you can have a favorite in the moment. My favorite currently is this, but it'll change in a week.
I mean, but you can guess some. You can guess if you want to guess some films and see if they're like big ones for me, and films that I love.
Any those working class British films from like the noughties, like I can't remember what the guy who made them was, but I think that would be up your street. Or is it more like all international films?
When you say working class British films, which ones do you mean?
Hang on, I'll look.
Are you talking about Guy Ritchie films?
Not Guy Ritchie, but that could be in there for you. Lock, Stock.
I like Lock, Stock and Snatch. Yeah. And we recently watched The Gentleman on Netflix. That was great. Should we get into the comic and then we can have a tangent later?
Yeah, let's tangent later. Stick around for the tangent at the end of the show. We'll talk about films.
We can talk about our favourite film because do you know what? I haven't been reading anything recently. So we could just at the end just have a little chat about our favourite films.
Yeah, content consumption corner is a very broad umbrella to which we can talk about whatever.
We could do this thing. So, Junji Ito, what's it called? It's not called Spiral Jerk, is it?
It's not called Spiral Jerk. That's a different thing. That's where it's a circle jerk, but you make a spiral for some reason.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's so you get more cum on you.
Do we leave that in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Does he get more or less in a spiral as opposed to a circle?
Well, yeah, because in a spiral, there's a higher density of people and you're all pointing at each other at a certain point. It depends
how big the spiral is. Like, does it go all the way around?
In a circle, right, you're all just coming into the center of the circle. Whereas if you form a spiral, you're coming into the back of the guy behind you. No, you're coming into the back of the guy in front of you. Are you shoulder to shoulder
or are you front to back? Like, that's the difference.
Your shoulder... Because
traditional circle jerk would imply shoulder to shoulder, wouldn't
it? So this is still shoulder to shoulder, but you're forming a spiral so everyone gets the jizz onto someone.
The inclusion is the best part about that.
Well, I mean, yeah.
We have too many people for a circle jerk. Let's make it a spiral.
I assumed a circle jerk was where you all wanked each other off in a circle.
I don't think that's a prerequisite. And I don't think there's anyone stopping anyone from doing it that way, but...
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, you and I both went to a state school. What we need is somebody who went to a public school and they'd be able to explain it to us.
Public school or private school? I think it's more like a private school thing, isn't it?
Well, public school is the British name for a private school.
I thought there was levels. I thought private was like high tier and then public was like pay to be in, but it's not like the most expensive.
No, it's the opposite.
So
public schools are like
that's a misleading term.
Like Eton and Harrow are public schools.
Yeah,
they're the really posh ones.
That's quite misleading. You would think the word public would be not exclusive.
The word comes from the fact that they were the first public schools. They were the first schools that were open to the public and you paid to go there. And so the term is a hangover from when Eton and Harrow and places like that were the only schools.
Right. So
does that make
one
sense?
Of those fucked up, like, it's been ages since the original meanings applied, but we're still going to use the words.
Yeah. So, you like a public schoolboy in a little feather, a little straw boat or whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm definitely going to put a time marker in for when we start talking about the manga, which is now.
We could what we should do is cut all of that out and just put it at the end of the podcast.
We could, but I feel like the flow is like, the energy would be kind of weird when we taper off towards the end. Well, I say but we taper off towards the end.
Oh, honey, that's rude. It's also true.
Tell me when I'm telling lies.
The problem is, you get me in and then you sit me down for like 2 hours at a time. You can't expect me to maintain that level because that's not how my attention works.
I was going to say, can't expect you specifically. Yes, absolutely fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm the guy pushing the boulder up the hill trying to get you to do a 2 hour podcast. Yeah. Syphilis.
No.
What I said.
I will fight you. I will fight you because I can't focus on a 2 hour podcast, but I do know who Sisyphus was.
Yeah, I know who Syphilis is as well.
Clearly.
Right, so now we're back in the manga.
Junji
Ito is a renowned horror manga artist and writer.
Yeah.
And this is one of his most well-known seminal series. It was released in 1998 to 99, with it being released as part of, and I'm probably going to mess up the pronunciation here, but it was a serial in Shogakukan Weekly. So kind of, I think, a similar thing to like Shonen Jump, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this was a release thing in that, and then because of the success, it was later like released as its own thing, like its own manga
and book. It's all about spirals.
All about spirals, because Uzumaki, it turns out, is the translation spiral for Japanese.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, and as I said, one of the kind of most well-known ones, recently made into anime. What are your general first impressions of it?
I like the art.
The art, I think, is the biggest aspect
the
of
art
it.
is like the reason to be there, isn't it?
Yes. To the point where I think we should combine starting with the arting with the story, because I think the story is actually what takes a kind of back seat here. In a similar way,
there isn't really a story, is there? It's just a bunch of spirals.
But that's part of it. Yeah. In a what's the word, Lovecraftian way. Like it's not all explained. The added terror and fear comes from stuff is happening that we have no control over whatsoever.
Do you know he was a proper piece of shit?
Yeah, scandal noted. He was the most notable thing of that shit with him is that he was a very cowardly racist.
Yeah.
He espoused very racist views, but also had no problem being around the people he had those negative views about and not saying anything because he was like, oh no, I don't want to cause a disturbance.
Yeah.
I think you're all lower class. Like, I think you're worse than me in my race. I think I'm the master race, but I don't want to cause a tiff around here.
He was such a piece of shit. Yeah.
Exactly. But again, scandal noted. But also notable horror writer.
I think this is the thing that because I'd never read this and I'd heard about it and people had talked to me about it quite a few times. And I was expecting more from the story.
That's interesting because I think that's it's if you're going at it with like a traditional, especially manga kind of viewpoint, like those stories are normally like beat by beat, bit by bit, like. Every other manga we've read is like A to B to C, like this happens, the character reacts, and traditional storytelling essentially. Yeah. I think it is. I mean, I know for a fact Junji Ito was influenced by Lovecraft and his storytelling, and I think it's not just that he liked that storytelling and wanted to recreate it. I think it's that his main goal was to. He had these ideas for I think he had the drawings first. I think he had the idea for like this is a horrific looking drawing that I can make. How do I incorporate it into a story?
And it is proper creepy looking.
Yes.
Like the tongue.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
It's just creepy. And so the artwork's really good. Is there a colorized version of this that we were missing?
Not that I know of, no.
Because there was just those 2 colored pages at the start, wasn't there?
Yeah. I think that's like a manga thing from back then. I think those are things that are incorporated into the collected version. So maybe they were in the original weekly releases, maybe they were.
It's so hard to know because I imagine there's a million different editions and we were just reading one of them, right?
It's from over 20 years ago, so we're going to know. But I was going to say with regards to story that I use the John Wick comparison a lot, where it's like you're not going for the story. The story is just here's how we get from
conduit for the spirals.
Yes, a vehicle for what you're really there for. And with John Wick, it's fighting, and with this, it's horrific looking visions of people just really fucked up spirals.
Yes. So I think the idea that people start seeing spirals everywhere is fun because do you know about the Fibonacci series?
I know Fibonacci sequence, or loosely of it. Is that the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The Fibonacci series is an irregular set of numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a natural thing, and it's an observable thing. So if you look at a plant and the order of its leaves, you measure the angles between the leaves, they'll all be in the Fibonacci series because it's the optimal way for each leaf to get the most sunlight. If you use a regular set of numbers, they'll start covering each other. If you use the Fibonacci set, you end up with irregular and what looks like an irregular pattern of leaves, but it ends up being a spiral. And it's the same process by which once you start looking for spirals in nature, they're fucking everywhere. So
this is a bit more grounded version of like that. Was it the number 23, that Jim Carrey film?
Yeah.
It's like, I see 23 everywhere. It's like, if you add the numbers of 9/11 and add a 7, then you get 23 or whatever. It's like, that was like a real stretch. But this maybe a bit more rooted in reality.
Yes. If you look for Fibonacci spirals, you find them everywhere. And so it's really interesting that he picked spirals because actually, if you start looking at nature, you'll find Fibonacci spirals fucking everywhere.
I wouldn't be surprised if he was genuinely influenced by the snail's shell, which the guy is the first introduction of the spiral in the
Fibonacci series.
What did I say?
No, the snail shell.
Yeah.
Fibonacci series, yeah.
Sorry, did I call it a spiral and that was offensive to you?
Well, no. It's just because you said this, you mentioned the snail shell, and so I gave you a little whisper. It's like, that's also Fibonacci.
Yeah, we've established that Fibonacci is spiral. I'm just using the word spiral from now on.
Yeah, of course you are. Yeah, no, I also am using the word spiral Fibonacci.
I'm going to edit out every time you say that, just to be like, at the end, I'll be like, it's actually Fibonacci sequence, and then put in a chopped version of you going like, really? That's very interesting, Ryan. Like that.
You realise you say stuff like this, but you do the edit, right?
Yeah.
And so you're not going to want to do that.
Oh, no, probably not.
Next Sunday when you're finishing editing this.
It depends how much energy I've got while I'm editing. So we will see. Like, I've left myself the option. Like, I could do it if I want.
If not, you'll just cut it out.
I'll just cut it out completely, yeah.
So the artwork's really good.
And should point out, Junji Ito, artist and writer, as is traditional with manga, it seems.
Yeah. So the art is really good. I will elaborate on that.
Sure.
Because I've just said the art is really good twice.
Right, podcast over. We're done now.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got what you needed.
I think it's really well drawn and it's clean. There's none of that jank that I sometimes complain about. You know, everything's really proportionate and really tight looking.
None of the chibi stuff, which we have normally seen in mangas.
But that would be really weird if a horror had all the chibi stuff.
Yeah, the tone would not suit it at all.
No.
Maybe why I prefer this kind of manga versus the traditional manga.
Did you like it?
Yeah, I like Junji Ito stuff.
You like horror though, don't you?
Yes, I'm a horror fan, yeah. So that's a lot of reason why. And this is a very unique kind of horror. And I don't like horror films where they jump scare and stuff like that. Because no one likes to be jump scared. Everyone just feels embarrassed afterwards. Oh, God. But I especially appreciate horror that makes you feel uneasy and disturbed without jump scaring you, because
like
I think
that's existential horror.
Yeah, and it's more difficult, and I appreciate it more when someone does it well. And I think these just still images, when you look at them, just incite that kind of uneasy feeling.
They're really fun and creepy, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and just sort of the all-encompassing and very swift mental departure. So is it the protagonist's friend's dad?
Yes.
The first one who goes all spirally.
Yeah, a point I was going to make was it's really interesting who is the protagonist, because at one point it's this girl, and then at another point it's the guy whose parents are affected, and it kind of jumps. Apparently, so we're just covering the first 3 chapters because that's about 100 pages or so. Yeah. And well, like, I think you get the experience. Like, we're not like, it's not like, oh no, the scary stuff happens later. It's like, no, we're getting the scary stuff like here and now. But I think it's the whole town. And you know that from the start when the guy's like, this town is creepy. There's weird whirlpools in the river, and there's little tornadoes that go past. It's just everything spirals. Like, everything spirals in this town. But it's interesting that he, speaking on the story a little bit in a opposition to where we normally talk about the art first. I think the art's kind of more bigger portion later. But in terms of the story, I think he does a good job of setting like, oh, this character goes to school in the city, so he sees the difference. Yeah. Whereas everyone in the town is just, oh, this is normal because that's all they live there. That's all they know. But
it's normal that everything is a spiral.
Yeah, and then, but again, that's that Lovecraftian thing of like, the Lovecraftian aspects I think Ito uses here work really well with. Again, he's just trying to get the creepy images out there. Yeah. So Lovecraftian stories like, something creepy's happening, but we don't want to explain any of it, because when you explain stuff, that makes it, you shine a light on it and makes it less creepy. So the idea that's like, this thing is happening, no one knows why it's happening, no one can do anything about it, but at the same time, there's also a slow creeping tension, like it slowly builds. So it's not Lovecraftian where it's like, Cthulhu's here, and we're all insignificant and small and, in the universe, and he's going to wipe us out with a thought kind of thing. This is like, stuff's happening and it's slowly building up and we don't know why, and then big stuff happens and then everything goes fine again. Like, that's that odd pacing contributes to the story, in a good way.
It's jarring.
Yes. And everything slowly ramps up in the tension. Like, the first chapter is the dad slowly becoming obsessed with spirals. Yeah. And it builds up where he's looking at a shell, and then one point he's like, I love spirals, me, and he's just like collecting all spirals, and he's talking to all his friends about spirals. And there's even a part where I thought this was so good, in like such an under-noticed technique here. There's a part where the guy's talking about his dad and the fact that his dad he got angry they didn't have spiral fish cakes in the miso soup. He stirs the miso soup to make a spiral in it. Yeah. And he is naked at his bath, making a whirlpool in it before and he just sits in a spiral. Yeah. And the son tells all that, and the girl laughs. Yeah. Because that's funny.
It's silly.
That's funny. And I think that adds to the creepiness, because you've got like a tonal misdirect. Yeah. I think that's 100% intentional. It's like, well, that's a guy spinning a bathtub and sitting in it. It's like, I love spirals, me. It's funny. Yeah. And then a few scenes after that, and by the way, we're getting it's come out in the night, we're doing all spoilers, blah, blah. And then immediately soon after that, you've got the woman delivering the pottery piece from her dad as well. It's like, oh, I don't need it anymore. We can all spiral. Look at this. And just puts his tongue into a spiral. And that's why I think it then shifts from like...
His tongue, which is now the size of his head.
Yes.
Is now just a giant spiral, and he goes all spirally, and it's all very creepy.
Yeah. And the fact that he just jumps into that, and then you go, oh, this is creepy now.
Yeah.
Like, it was funny, and now it's creepy. Like, I think that he does a lot of little stuff, which I think all towards enhancing the effect of the creepy, scary stuff later on.
Yeah.
And in terms of story as well, I think he's really good at that slow pacing of reveals of stuff. So chapter 1, the big reveal at the end is dad, guy, whatever his name is, has ordered a big tub thing, like a container.
Yeah.
A big circular container. And the mum and the son get home when they're about to take him to a mental institution. And he's cajoled himself into a human spiral in this container. Somehow got the lid back on himself, which is extra
it's
creepy.
Incredibly impressive.
How did he do that? That's even creepier. Like, but
the neighbor came and helped him.
Yeah. But there's slow reveal. And I should mention now, a lot of stuff I'm mentioning, we try and do our kind of own original assessment of this kind of stuff. I had, well before this, watched a YouTube video by Matt with 4Ts who breaks down like how Ito stuff works. And so I saw the video first of this, so this is an original thought. But if you look
Don't plagiarize.
It's not plagiarized if you credit the person. Plagiarism if I passed off as my own.
Yeah, okay.
So what he pointed out was that in the page, there's a long tension between when the reveal happens. Yeah. And it goes from like them in the hallway, opening a door, seeing the box thing, talking to each other, going to open it. Yeah. And like when you think it's going to be revealed, it still hasn't yet. And he adds this tension, So then when it finally reveals, it's like, oh God, what is this? You know? And you know something bad's going to happen, and it's that
Gary is in the box.
He's done it. He's bloody done it.
So I'll be honest, I'm not a horror fan, because horror either scares me, which I don't like, or it's just a bit silly and I find it funny. And I have to admit, this did fall into it was a bit silly and I found it all a bit funny.
I think it's that at points, absolutely. I think it's...
when he's contorted into the box.
Yeah. But that as an image is like, what the fuck is this kind of thing?
Yeah, but it's quite funny, isn't it? And the fact that you just pointed out that he managed to get the lid on.
Yeah.
That's quite funny.
And we don't know what happened.
We don't know how he did it.
I think especially the concept of it is funny. I think it is the attention to detail in the drawing and like the facial expression and stuff. When you're looking at it, it's like, wow, this is kind of something else, you know? But in terms of the art in general, like, again, we'll mention the story as we go along because it's kind of a thing for it. You mentioned the Fibonacci sequence. There's a lot of, was it golden thirds or whatever? Was it the golden or rule of thirds kind of thing?
Rule of thirds. Well, there's the rule of
golden
thirds.
Ratio. That's what I was trying to think.
So the golden ratio is a face thing.
Yes. So he uses that for faces a lot as well. And a quote that I saw from him as well was his thing about what he likes to draw is he likes to draw either especially beautiful stuff or especially horrific stuff.
And he does both really well. One of the things I noticed about the artwork is that when it's not creepy, it's incredibly well drawn.
Yes.
Incredibly so. And I think that's a real testament, because if it was janky and a bit shitty, when everything got creepy, you just sort of go, well, is he actually just trying to draw a face? But because his everything's so clean, it really accentuates how creepy the creepy stuff is, or how funny the creepy stuff is, depending on how you find it.
Yeah. The actual like entire panels and stuff, I think the use of like black, which for some reason the thing has come up in the past few episodes, but you can tell when everything's normal and everything's fine. It's just like a normal manga kind of drawing, like a well done one. When it gets creepy, that's when the background becomes like completely, not even completely pitch black, but there's a lot of black in the background.
Yeah, it gets a bit darker.
And that gives you like a sense of like, oh, everything's bad now without it. Well, you're not consciously like, things are bad now, but like before he sticks out his tongue and curls it, it's like there's the darkness of the indoors compared to the outdoors where she's just come from. Those kind of things, it always adds to the tension, like or the sense that something's wrong in the moment. And in terms of chapter 2, I think the story then goes, then we get to the point where he gets he's dead.
He does die.
He didn't survive.
He didn't survive the box.
The spiral box. No, he killed himself in pursuit of true spiral form.
True spiraldom.
Yes, and he then gets cremated, and in the cremation, the smoke makes spirals. Form spirals.
So creepy.
Yeah, and his face smoke.
Yeah,
great art. That was like such a unique. From everything else, that was like a unique drawing style, like the cloud that you film. It felt like the texture of the cloud and how like it was like smog, like black smog in the air kind of thing. And then his tongue is doing the spiral. Yeah, his cloud face has also got a tongue spiral as well.
A tongue spiral. Is it a spiral tongue or a tongue spiral? Tongue spiral.
Tongue spiral, sure. And then his wife or widow at this point is then going insane because of spirals.
Yes.
Another
she shaves her hair bald and burns her fingertips
Doesn't
off.
burn them. I vividly remember.
She cuts them off, doesn't she?
Cuts them off. Yeah. And I tell you what as well, that I looked at that one for a while because that was especially disconcerting. Like everyone has their like weird things. It's like things affect you more than other things.
Yeah.
Like I can watch really violent horrors, like dismemberment and all this bollocks, and just generally be like, well, that's a bit rough, but it's not affecting me. And then little things like I could watch like all the Saw films and all that and be absolutely, like expected reaction, but just generally fine. But then I'll watch something like, there was always a prime example, bit in the first Jackass film where they're doing paper cuts with sandpaper.
Yeah.
That I'm like, can't watch it.
It makes me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, don't want to do. And sorry for anyone listening, skip 30 seconds if you don't want to hear this description. But the scissors closing in on the skin of the fingertips and such sensitive areas as well. That image I looked at for quite a while. It's like, this is really getting to me.
Because did you know your fingertips are so sensitive that you can feel things that are smaller than what you can see?
Yeah, I saw that similar topic, but it was the size of a thing that you could feel.
It's microns.
Yeah, like it was compared to like a mountain on the earth or something.
You can feel like if you were running your finger across the earth,
it would feel smooth.
No, you could feel a car.
Right, that's it.
So that's it. You could feel a car on planet Earth if your finger was giant and the Earth was like something you were touching. You like if you've ever sanded a piece of wood, you can feel blemishes in the wood that your eyes can't see because we can feel microns, and so. The idea of somebody cut it, it reminded me of something else that's always stuck with me. It was that episode of Black Mirror where the young girl goes past the museum.
Yeah, that Black Museum one, that really affected me.
Where the doctor, right at the end, the guy who got addicted to pain and he was like chipping away at himself.
Yeah.
And just like pulling teeth and cutting fingers off, and he was like a shell. And it was like, oh, that's so gross. And it was that same thing, wasn't it? Where this poor woman had like been so ruined by these spirals that she was just chipping away at herself, and it's like, oh, it's so disgusting.
And especially in that moment, I think the way it tells us so good as well is you see her first where she's got the shaved head and bandages on her hands. So intuitively you're like, she wasn't like that before when you last saw her. So like something's happened to her. And then the son retelling to his girlfriend like, oh, she did this, this, and this. So it's like, it tells you something's happening, something's coming, and then it shows you like, that was really bad. Like, oh, I didn't want to see that. The story for that chapter, I think what's really interesting is you expect it after reading chapter 1 to just be spirals. Like people, like as in people become obsessed with spirals, and then the similar thing happens with the dad. Like people become obsessed with.
But cleverly, what you see is the fallout.
Exactly, and the opposite reaction, but with similar results. Yeah. Where the wife becomes deeply scared, like a phobia of spirals, but it's ruining her life to the same degree as her husband, who was obsessed with spirals. And I think it's a smart way to go, where it's like, he obviously had this idea for like, I'm doing spiral stuff. He had planned out for like, this is going to happen, and this like different spiral thing. Yeah,
it's endlessly creative, isn't it? And I imagine, I like to think in my head that this is one of those things that he was like sat at a bar with his friends drinking beer. One of them went, I bet you could make a fucking horror story out of spirals. And he was like, all right then, go on then. I'll do it. I'll fucking do it. And he did.
But then, the reality I think is so much better. He's like, he had the idea. It's like, I'm going to make a horror story about spirals. And I was like, what? Okay.
You're mad.
And then it's like, this is amazing.
Yeah, and it is And I agree with you. I think seeing the two different reactions to the spirals, because if you'd just seen another person get obsessed with them, it would have been like, I don't know, the fucking Scream films, where it's like, oh, there's another masked killer with a knife killing pretty young girls. Oh, there's somebody else who got obsessed with the spirals, and it's like, no, we're seeing a multitude of different reactions to the spirals, and that's somehow more scary.
Yeah, exactly. And again, like the comparison you made,
that one wasn't funny to me.
Yeah.
The mum wasn't funny to me. The mum was like kind of harrowing.
You don't feel as much for the dad. Like, even if you anticipate he's going to kill himself in a spiral, you're like, yeah, but you got, like, he was obsessed with it. Like, he was excited about stuff. So you don't feel sorry for him. The wife feels like she's suffering this thing that's happening. Like,
you think there's maybe an allegory for addiction here?
Potentially, yeah. Yeah.
It's like he became so obsessed with the thing that it consumed his life and he wasn't able to do anything else, and ultimately it killed him. And then what we see is his wife suffering because of him and his
addiction.
Exactly. There is an allegory for addiction in there, isn't there?
Yeah, if you look at it from the addiction way, it's like there's a lot of similarly with like you say, the ripple effects of ruining the family and that
absolutely
kind of stuff.
Yeah, so. I mean, it ultimately is ruinous to his family, isn't it? This obsession, this fixation on the spirals.
And one other part I forgot to mention, the comedic part earlier, was when he's spiraling his eyeballs independently.
And they had to he couldn't quite work out how to show it, so he just had to explain it.
Yes, I think she shows panel by panel the pupil disappearing into the under the skin.
But he doesn't quite nail it.
No, and I think that you could maybe say that's like an ambitious thing for the medium, which doesn't quite pay off. Incredibly. Yeah,
but I think it's kind of funny because he then says, by the way, his eyes are spiraling. And I don't know if that appears in the original Japanese, because obviously we're reading a translation. But it was quite funny, wasn't it?
Well, we find this with a lot of mangas where it's like English translation can sometimes come off quite literal because that's how Japanese language is, isn't it? And then in English it looks more stilted and
Japanese doesn't translate into English all that well, I don't think.
But then this is the kind of story where that works best then, because it's not as much about dialogue and story, and it's about the imagery and just getting there.
This would work without any of the words.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I think the words are just part of like making it a bit more accessible to.
They're there, and they're there because they're part of the medium and people like to read. But this comic book would make sense without any of the words.
Yeah, you
wouldn't necessarily know what all the relationships were, because that's the exposition that comes with the words. But this totally would function without the words.
I think if Ito was given the beforehand the challenge beforehand of like make one without words, I think he could make it that way. Like easily.
Absolutely, yeah.
He probably has. We probably don't even know about it. We're probably talking about, I reckon he could do this.
He's made quite a lot of stuff, hasn't he?
Oh, yeah. He's done loads of stuff. He's never stopped. And I think what helps is he does a lot of smaller things, whereas we know a lot of manga writers and artists, they'll do like one thing for like decades. And it's like trying to get into One Piece. It's like, what chapter's on? It's on 367, you idiot. Like, catch up. And it's like, I won't bother. Like, I'll watch the Netflix adaptation instead. Netflix going to come up later as well with adaptations. In terms of the part where the wife is in the mental institute, and ironically the one that she was going to send her husband to beforehand, another great bit of, I always equate this to it's a Hitchcock's thing about like the bomb under the table, like building tension. When they're in the doctor's office and she's obsessed with spiral, she's terrified of spirals and is damaging herself because of this. They're in the doctor's office, and the son sees on the anatomy chart the spiral of the inner ear. Yeah. And that I thought was such a great bit, because I thought she was going to notice it just after he did. Yeah. But she doesn't. So then he's got this like, oh my God, if she finds out there's a spiral in her ear, that's going to be horrific. Yeah. And tells the reader that. So you as the reader, you're like, this is going to happen.
It's
this is going to happen,
isn't it?
And then they do such a great bar where then they have the bit with the centipede, which I think was kind of random, but I guess it works because there's a centipede. Maybe it's the dead husband. And maybe it's
it certainly has his voice in his face, doesn't it?
Maybe it was a dream, we don't know. But then when she throws a book at or something, it dies and it curls into a spiral. So that, obviously. And I think that the centipede, the drawing on that is really good. Yeah. Then he tells her, as the centipede, it's like, by the way, there's a spiral in your ear. Just so you know.
There's spirals in you. We're all spirals.
Yeah. And then she then is like, he said there's a spiral in the ear. And the son's like, and she's like, he's right, isn't he? And he's like, no. It's like, there was an anatomy thing in the guy's office. I'm going to go check it. And as the reader, you're like, oh no, she's going to go see it. And then she gets there and there's no poster. And she's like, where was that poster? He's like, oh, it was old. It was faulty. So I sent it off. And she's like, have you got any books about the ear? He's like, no, I ain't got them, whatever. And she's like, you're lying. And they're like the paranoia, again, the addiction allegory.
Yeah.
And I just love that he then the cuts to the son. And I think he's got an internal thing or he's talking to someone else where he's like, yeah, we knew we were going to take that down. And I thought that was such a good tension builder because the reveal is we're holding it off.
Absolutely.
It's not done. It's not gone. But we've got to wait for the horrible thing you're expecting to happen. You have to wait a little longer.
And this is the thing. And it kind of, it's where the obsession comes back in, isn't it?
Because she's now paranoid. She doesn't trust anyone.
And paranoia is kind of a form of obsession.
Yep, absolutely. Just because everyone's out to get you doesn't mean you. Well, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean everyone's not out to get you.
Oh, don't do that.
I may be paranoid, but I'm not wrong.
A lot of people listen to this shit on headphones. You can't do that.
I'm right behind you.
Oh, no, that's awful. I am too.
We're just hanging out behind you.
Imagine if we were, though.
How are you?
You having a nice day?
Don't turn around.
Don't turn around. Don't turn around.
I just want to know how your day's been. Don't look at me.
So volume 3.
God help if this is someone's first episode.
I know, right? But we say this every time. Every week we're like, oh, this better not be someone's first episode. We have to just come to terms with the fact that we
get on board immediately or don't listen.
Well, we just make a bit of an unhinged thing.
Yeah. I sent you that meme the other day of a podcast and me and my mate talk about films, but we also have a bit of a laugh.
Yeah.
I said to you, it's like, that's kind of us, but also way more unhinged.
Totally.
So let's have a laugh about this. It's like, I'm behind you.
There are points where this podcast has gotten really fucking avant-garde for no reason. Do you remember when we did the whole, over weeks and weeks, we did the whole bit about us being wheeled out in a blank room and it all got really dystopian?
What bit?
Oh, no, don't do it. We went through a whole phase where shit just started getting really avant-garde and we had to rein it in.
Just like us and our entire histories of beings, this podcast goes through phases and we will not elaborate.
Yeah,
we will not explain.
You just need to go back and listen to all of it and you'll see.
We will drop entire storylines for no reason.
Yeah, I mean, do you remember the early episodes were 2/3 tangent, weren't they? It was fantastic.
Of course. They're horrible.
They were brutal. And I know so many people who have come to me and found out I make a podcast and they've listened to an early episode and been like, a lot of not comic book talk. And I'm like, yeah, just pick one from more recently. I promise it gets better.
Just go newer is always better.
And then somebody will pick up today's episode and be like, they talk about cum spirals for the first 15 minutes.
That's if I leave that in.
Oh, you have to.
Talking about putting parts at the end, that's a prime contender for
for going at the end.
Cut that out here, put that there. That's a little better.
Oh, so but the problem is I've now mentioned the cum spirals again.
Yeah, but this is now a foreshadowing. Of storytelling.
It's cum shadowing.
Storytelling little aspect there, little tool, some say.
But yeah, no, I think the whole thing is so going back to the comic book, I think it's good and it's interesting. I think it's something that could only work as a manga. I don't think it works as a Western comic.
Yes, yeah. I was going to talk about adaptation. I'll talk about that later, but yes.
I think it only really works as a manga. And I think it's sort of, I think last year when we did horror stuff, we found a vein of slasher comics. So there was the Maniac in New York.
Yep. Spawn.
There was that stuff that was all right. But then a lot of it kind of really was the same as horror films. And it was all trying to build suspense through story and plot. And I don't think it really was in service of the medium, or at least the medium wasn't in service of what they were trying to achieve.
Mm.
And I think where this stands out from a lot of the horror stuff we did last time round is that the medium is really working in service of what he's trying to achieve.
I mean, if anything, it's the medium is sacrificing what would normally be the most important parts, which are the story and the character relationships. It's going, fuck all that. Look at this horrific image.
But I would argue that a lot of the stuff that I think is really great in comic books is down to the art.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, one of the things that I've noticed from having conversations with comic book nerds is that they never go, oh my God, this story's amazing, this writing's amazing. Because let's be frank here, the writing often isn't amazing in comic books.
But
not compared to written literature anyway.
I think that personally, I want to turn that around in the kind of comic book discussion. Like, I know what you mean.
That's only because you can't read, though.
This is because I only can read. I can't read art. That's my problem.
Yeah,
show me.
You can't read art, and you don't like reading books, so you like comic books.
Yeah. Show me a Van Gogh and a stick figure, and I'm like, both equally fine. both the same.
I mean, they are. Depends on what era of Van Gogh you're looking at, doesn't it?
His stick figure era.
His stick figure era. So, like, what, 1 to 3?
Yeah. He was very early on. He came out of the womb with stick figure pictures, and they were like, guy's probably an artist.
But no, I think so. A lot of these horror comics, they go for plot and they go for story, and they try and build suspense that way. And I think it missed the mark. Remember there was the one about the house,
and like witches and stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it went for creepy, or like the Five Nights at Freddy's thing we read.
That was awful.
That was really bad. Whereas this, I think the medium is really working in service of what he's trying to achieve, which is a very thinly veiled story with very little plot that is essentially just chaining together a bunch of really creepy fucking drawings he did of spirals. Yeah. And that's really cool.
I'll tell you what else he does across all
his stuff. But you see
my
point?
Yeah, I'm going to support it as well. The other thing he does as well, which is all in service of what you said, is he, across all his story and all his fiction, he just terrorizes his characters.
Yeah.
He just puts them in this ungodly, like, you'll never know why this happened. You're just going to go through this unimaginable terror, which is going to look horrific. You're never going to know why, and it's just going to be horrible. Like, I think, because, and again, that's what he means, like, in service of what he's trying to achieve here. Part of that is just look at the terror on these people's faces, and you could only do that with great art, and especially specifically great facial art, because the terrorized look on people's faces is exactly what gets over the line. It'd be one thing if, like, that panel where the page where they discover the guy in the spiral thing, not only is your eye drawn to him, literally, also the spiral thing is that ratio. Yeah. It draws you into every image with that in.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's why he did it. He was just like, I'm just going to draw everyone into the horrible images by making them spirals.
Yeah.
I keep drawing spirals in the air
hand.
every time I talk about it. But not only that, but he has the wife and the son's faces reacting to it, and they just look terrified. Like,
and actually capturing a terrified expression is really hard.
Exactly, and that's why he's so good at it.
It's a very, I mean, terror is a very nuanced emotion, and actually, as an artist, being able to capture sheer terror is really, really challenging. There's a reason that you don't see it much in classical art, and it's because the materials and the techniques that they had and stuff weren't as good, and you know, it was really hard to capture that kind of thing. And you are right, he does a fantastic job of it. And so I think this is one of those instances where form and function meet beautifully.
Yes,
there is a purpose, there is something that he is trying to achieve here, and the form that he's chosen to do it in serves it very well. There's no other art form where you get to show me a series of really creepy still images chained together with a loose story about spirals.
It doesn't do anything other than what the main thing it's trying to do. It doesn't even bother trying to be like, and then they lived happily ever after the end, or but maybe there's a love interest going on in all this, and maybe those crazy kids work out if they escape the slasher.
No, it's fucking spirals.
Yeah. Like Western horror, especially more nowadays, elevated horror, I'm doing in quote marks, always has
elevated horror. Is that what they call it?
It's the idea that because horror was always considered like Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Halloween, where it's just slasher stuff. Now it's like, oh no, these are characters who have histories and arcs with all that horror. That's and I don't think you need to classify that, but it's just what
Friday
people
the 13th.
do. Yeah, I fucking love Friday the 13th.
Halloween.
Yeah,
Halloween is amazing.
First Nightmare on Elm Street is one of the best, scariest films I think ever. Just the concept of like, guys going to kill you in your dreams. What are you going to do? Not sleep. Yeah. Like, that's so good.
Yeah.
But
I like a slasher flick.
Yes. But my point is, Western horror always has especially characters who like have a tragic backstory before the horror starts.
Yeah.
And then it's
my boyfriend Brad left me, so I'm going to go to this beach house by the lake.
It's more like my parents were killed in a tragic car accident. Like,
yeah.
And now I'm doing this kind of thing. But with Ito, it's just they're normal people, and now they're experiencing like unspoken
creepy
horrors
spirals.
And creepy spirals. Like, and I think that again, like he's not doing anything else other than what the best stuff he can do is.
Yeah.
And that it comes through in the work, absolutely. In terms of like horror concepts, like again, we're talking about spirals, and it's just like, whoa, crazy stuff is happening with spirals and bodily horror. One thing I especially liked is the fate of the mother, who, spoiler alert for this little bar, she finds out that there's spirals in her ears.
Yeah.
And then she takes I think she uses an IV thing. Yeah. I think she rips out of her arm and just trigger warning for anyone. I know that kind of stuff gets to people, like IV veins and that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Basically, she gets at the spirals in her ears. And I think this is one of the few parts where the horror part here is written. It's just told, which for this comic, like if any other comic, they do that too much and it's bad. For this one, it's like, you know what? Tell, don't show for a bit, because you do so much showing.
Also,
will allow you some tell.
Also, because he doesn't do gore. The one thing Junji Ito doesn't really delve into is gore. And so he had a moment where any image that would have been sufficiently shocking would have just been gore.
Yeah.
And I think he's kind of above that. So it's like, it's almost more creepy that we don't see her ultimate end.
You see just her lying in a bed, which is, again, like very subtle image for what he does.
Yeah.
But he tells you, I think it's the son is,
yeah.
I can't remember like what exactly it is.
The son's having a conversation about it, isn't it?
Somehow it's because she stabbed that part in the ear, that's the part that controls balance.
Yeah.
She stabbed those in both ears. She's now stuck in the feeling of spinning like a spiral. So the thing she was running away from, the irony is that has now trapped her within her own body to experience a spiraling sensation before she dies.
Yeah.
And that, it almost would have been more tragic if she hadn't died.
Yeah.
Because if she stayed like that for like however long.
Yeah.
But the idea of like anyone who's listening to this, and us especially, know those nights where you've probably had a bit too much to drink and you tried to go to sleep and the room is spinning and you're like,
oh, it's the worst, isn't it?
Imagine that, but permanently.
Yeah.
Like that's, like they describe it as vertigo, isn't it? It's the feeling of vertigo. But I think that as a concept is so her trapped in a hospital bed.
Hotel?
I mean, you can be trapped in a hotel as
She's trapped in a travel lodge.
I mean, that's arguably worse.
Yes.
With a hangover. Ooh.
Oh, a travel lodge with a hangover.
Yeah.
God. And they're the only times you end up in a travel lodge as well as when you're drinking, isn't it?
Yeah, pre-drinking or post-drinking.
Yeah.
Especially depressing if you're drinking in a travel lodge. At least go to somewhere else like nearby. Like don't drink in the travel lodge. At least
go to the bar of the local Premier Inn.
Exactly. Go to the Premier Inn and then sleep at the travel lodge. Absolutely how it works. Then chapter 3. Did you read chapter 3?
Mostly.
It was basically, what if a person was what if a person was a spiral like the dad? What if a person was a spiral like this new creepy way that you didn't even think of before? But basically, a girl has a weird crescent-shaped scar, which it gets into like, that's how she tracks all boys. And it's like, all right, fair enough.
Yeah.
And then this is where the son is now kind of obsessed and scared of spirals as well. Not to the degree of the mum or the dad, but he's justified to be as scared of spirals as he is now.
He's killed both his parents.
Yes, exactly. And then she just turns into a human. A spiral develops on her forehead.
Yeah.
To the point where the biggest scene for that as well, this is where it gets weird. It's like, does she know about spirals? Is she part of this spiral thing, or is it just happening to her and she doesn't, she's just going along with it? Because what else are you going to do when you got a spiral enveloping your head? The sight of the spiral in her forehead that's like getting bigger, the perspective of it seemingly endless within her forehead, the way it shows, like the perspective that it shows that, I thought was incredible.
Yeah.
Like that's probably one of the most difficult. If you asked any other artist to do that,
it's sort of boring into her head, isn't it?
But it looks like, and as we find out in a bit, it is endless. Like it's not like it doesn't stop at the back of a head. Like it keeps going into, and that's the Lovecraftian mystery part, is we don't know what it is in there.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to, I said, there gets to a panel where it's consumed most of her upper head, and there's one eyeball that then gets sucked in to the spiral. And I thought that was a great, you said that how it didn't work with the spinning eyeballs.
Yeah.
This, I think, worked better where you saw the panels of it slowly lodging free and then going into the spiral.
It totally worked, didn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And then that's, again, on the line of obsession. She becomes obsessed with the son.
Yeah.
Who, because he's the one guy that wasn't obsessed with her, and it's that whole kind of like, you want what you can't have.
But now she's a spiral.
Yeah, well, no,
now she's a sexy spiral.
No, it's the opposite. He's scared of her. He doesn't want
He's
to put...
a sexy spiral.
He doesn't want to put anything in that spiral.
No,
Unlike that other guy.
He wants to put everything in the spiral.
I don't think he wanted to put everything. He wanted to put something in the spiral, and then everything went in the spiral. And he just went in there, and it's like, what happened to him? Who knows?
He's in the spiral.
He's in there. He's who knows? But it's through the looking glass.
Through the spiral.
Through the spiral. But it's interesting
we need a spiral count at the end, if you can manage that.
No. I'm going to say no. Not happening.
If that would be a manual process, wouldn't it?
One day we'll have someone editing this for us, and for us, I mean for me, and I will put in a note like, by the way, count all the spirals at the end. It's like, here's an extra hour of work for you.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. No extra money, obviously.
I mean, we could get one of the illiterates to do it.
I wouldn't trust those lot. God, no.
If any of the illiterates would like to count the spirals...
Didn't we say we were going to use that phrase and see if it happens organically?
Well, I've just started, so
it
just happened.
All right, if you listen to this podcast, you're an illiterate now.
Yeah, that's... We've been mulling this over for like 2 years.
It's been the biggest thing going in our lives. It was like, what should we call the people who listen?
And unfortunately, there's an obvious name, and it's the illiterates.
It's one and only answer that makes sense, and it's the illiterate.
Yeah.
So if you're an illiterate, be proud. Tell your family.
Tell your family, tell your friends, I'm an illiterate. We'll get hats made at some point or something.
Yeah, and it'll be misspelled.
Oh, that's such a good idea. That's such a good idea. We're doing that.
if we remember. That should be an important caveat with anything we say on this podcast.
But it's on the podcast now.
Yeah, and then the episode goes out and we're on to the next one. We're very busy people. We're like creative sharks. We're always moving forward.
You used to send me proofs, and I used to listen to it before it went out. I don't bother anymore.
You don't have time.
There was an episode recently where I had like a 20-minute rant about witches. And I was like, can you cut that out? And then I couldn't even be asked to listen to the proof to work out if I wanted it cut out or not.
No.
And the episode just went out as is.
But we recorded a pre-warning, so
we did. And apparently that was funny, apparently, according to people. I've not listened to it. I don't know.
I'll tell you what as well, while I remember. I've been watching, I would have saved this for Content Corner. I've been watching a MCU show, Agatha All Along, all about witches, and it all is about like going against the stereotype of witches.
Rad.
So it's witch characters, and they're like, they think we kidnap and eat children. And one's like, yeah, I haven't done that in decades. Like,
nice. That's
so
funny.
I thought you should give that a go if you like that kind of stuff. I know you like that kind of stuff.
I do, yeah.
So check out if you got Disney Plus now or not.
I mean, I'm kind of done.
I tell you what, I've got more, not so much on the comic itself, but interesting larger stuff of this.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, I'm up for having that conversation.
Yeah, the thing, this is more art centric. Again, why we're not separating story and art, because they're just so intertwined with this. Did you notice that with the faces, and I didn't notice until this was pointed out for me by YouTube video, Matt with 4Ts, great video, check out if you can, after finishing this episode, obviously. Did you notice the faces of the characters, the protagonists, or whatever, were much more simple faces. Still with like a little bit of detail, but not too much. Every other character, much more detailed. Yeah. And then the really horrific parts, extremely detailed.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
So the reason for that, do you know why that is? Like what the technique of that is?
I mean, I imagine it's probably to do with ease of drawing for him.
It's surprisingly not, and I probably would guess that as well. It turns out it's generally it's a common manga thing which you see across the board to a degree as well, but it's even more prevalent here because protagonists tend to have simple faces because you put yourself in the shoes of the character if the more simple face they have.
Right, yeah.
So the more less detailed a face is, you can put yourself in it.
Onto it.
The more detailed it is or realistic, you're like, well, that's another person. Like that's different to me. In this, that works even better because those faces are the ones who are reacting in terror to the horror stuff.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So it's the technique of like you are putting yourself in the shoes of the people who are screaming at this horrific thing that's happening, and that kind of puts you in their shoes. So that's a technique that uses manga and is used quite a bit here as well to terrifying effect, I'd say. But other than that, I think that's pretty much as we can say about Spirals. And I think we got more out of Spirals than most other people could.
The thing is, it's fascinating, but there's not a lot to say about it because it is essentially just a string of very creepy drawings.
Yeah,
eventually. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's great. It's a really good time, but that's what it is.
Eventually it does become, look how creepy this image is.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of Ito stuff is he does a lot more short stuff, like short stories as opposed to this longer running stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what I've read. Like, I haven't read any of his longer running things like this, but I've read there's one where there's holes in a cliff that are shaped like people. And then, but if you find the one that's your hole, you are drawn to it and you climb in it and you're gone.
Oh.
And then it shows at the end what happens is you go through this hole that's like shaped like your outline. You're moving through it. As you move through it, you get like pulled apart slowly because it's the shape slowly changes as you move through it, and it gets to a point where it's like your arms are pulled really far and your head's like pulled away from your neck, like from your torso and stuff like that, and they're just like people are screaming in it. But the horror of that, like with this, it's the obsession that someone has.
You just can't not go in the hole.
There's a scene of someone like, it's mine, it's for me, I have to get in it, and everyone's like, what are you doing? But then once it happens to a few people, you realize if you see your hole, you will not be able to fight it. And it's that terror of like, if you see something, you will control it. It's like what was that Sandra Bullock horror film where it's like if you see the thing, it's so horrific that it makes you off yourself kind of thing. Like there's that kind of like, it's so horrific that it drives you insane. Like that kind of theme.
I don't know the film, but I see the concept.
Bird Box, that was what it's called. It's the one where they're wearing the blindfolds.
That was recent, wasn't it?
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I knew the topic.
Yeah.
Also, that Ito story is so funny. There was a webcomic recently. It was like a very, very niche joke, which was it was a triangle shape in a put the shape in the hole game. Yeah. He's like, it's for me. I know it is. I have to get in. It's like the triangle's just going in the triangle hole. So a little bit of humor there. And I've seen a bunch of other stuff. There's one where a guy, every time he sleeps, he lives a life in his dream.
Oh, wow.
But the dream gets longer. To him, it gets longer every time. But he ages as he's in the dream as well. So at one point, he ages like a year because he dreamt he had a year of life in this other dream world. But he wakes up a year older, and then it's 2 years, and then 3 years.
Yeah.
And it gets to a point where he goes to sleep, and he wakes up, and he's aged into just a horrific-looking, like Nosferatu kind of looking like creature.
Delightful.
And he's just like, I have to go to sleep again. Like, I don't know what's going to happen to me. Like, that kind of stuff. So, highly recommend if you like the idea of creepy manga images. The creepiest of all the manga images, I would say. Get into Junji Ito.
Yeah.
Well worth checking out.
Or even scared.
Or even just go on Google Images and search Junji Ito. You'll get like a similar thing.
Yeah, it's still a good time.
Yeah, highly recommend the stories, but you can get a little fix that way as well.
So
content consumption corner.
Films.
No, the adaptation. As well. This came up because they recently did an adaptation. It was made by Toonami for Adult Swim.
Oh, and God.
Did you ever watch Cartoon Network, like back in the day? That's the same Toonami bringing anime to the Western world.
Yeah.
They were, when we were kids, they were on Cartoon Network.
I remember Toonami.
Yeah, then they went away for years, and then they came back for Adult Swim, which I think is Cartoon Network still.
Yeah.
But I thought that was so interesting. It's like the show or like this studio has aged with its audience.
Yeah.
It's like, we know you're older now. Here's a violent horror anime, like, because we know you're in your 30s now.
Yeah.
And you could check this out. Whereas back in the day, it was like Dragon Ball and Yu-Gi-Oh! And Techi Muyo and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I just thought it's like a company has aged with its target audience, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But they made this adaptation, and there's been a big criticism of all anime adaptations of Ito's work previously because they've not been able to match the horror. Like, they've not done a good job. There was a Netflix one recently, which I watched, and it's just meh. It's
what
not.
Is it?
It's like Ito something. Like it's like a collection of all the shorter stories,
right.
but not even a short story. Sometimes it's one chapter from a larger story. And so it doesn't make sense because you've taken like chapter 3
you've taken
out of like a
context.
longer story, and it doesn't make sense. But yeah, that was just meh. I watched episode 1 of Uzumaki, the anime adaptation.
Yeah,
it is so good.
Yeah,
like Tell you what I thought when I watched it. I remembered the Watchmen comic, the movie, animated movie that I showed you a bit of.
Yeah.
And my big question with that, and I saw a lot of people had a similar reaction, was what's the point of this? Because it was a panel for panel shot, like a dialogue.
Because
exactly
some people want to watch it.
But it was like, it wasn't really bringing much new. It wasn't doing anything different. It wasn't adding. It didn't feel like it was adding anything to it. Or at least people could make that argument.
Yeah.
With this, I think what they realized was there's two aspects that we can make this better with. That's motion, like movement, and sound effects.
Yeah,
uses both of those things so well. The eyeball spinning looks better when it's
of course it does when it's animated.
Yeah, but what helps is like the character, he doesn't have the pupils in the middle, so he looks like dead-eyed almost, but with the movement. The spiral in the head, the eyeball slowly lodges and goes out. And the sound effects are like all like...
Is it really well Foleyed?
It's all... So was it diegetic, non-diegetic? I can't remember which is which. Diegetic is sound effects or sounds in the story, and non-diegetic is like background music.
So non-diegetic sounds are sounds that aren't involved in the story, and diegetic sound is in the story.
So non-diegetic, it's very tone setting, like creepy vibe, not too much, like does really well, exactly what it needs to be. Diegetic, there's parts where like the guy gets sucked into the spiral forehead and then the girl gets sucked in as well.
Is it really well Foleyed as well?
There's like the sounds of bone snapping and that kind of stuff. Like perfectly, like that's exactly what it needed. Not too much, like just enough to make you like feel what's happening.
Yeah.
There's the fingertip scene.
Oh.
They put in the sound to the point where I had to skip it. Like
really?
I had to move past it.
That brutal?
I was just like, oh, that's scary. You just hear
you have headphones
snipping.
on at the time
I was watching on the TV, but it's just the snipping sound. And with the image, like same image, like exactly, but with the motion and the sounds, like exactly what it needed to elevate it in only the way that anime could versus the manga.
So definitely worth it then.
100%, yeah. It's a limited thing. I think it's like 4-6 episodes, so it's not much, but I'm going to definitely check it out. I'm going to check out the rest. It's very good adaptation of it.
Awesome.
So, content consumption corner, I suppose that's kind of combined into that as well. But what content you've been consuming?
Well, I've not been consuming a lot, but we started a conversation earlier about films that we love.
And we were like, save it for the end.
Yeah. So
remember back then.
Because would you get, like, I don't know if you'd be able to guess what my favorite films are.
So we went lock, stock. Amelie is obviously one of yours.
I love Amelie. Do you know about Amelie?
I know a bit about it.
So it's a French film.
Yeah.
And it's just really beautiful, and it's scored by this chap called Jan Tiersen, who is like a French rock and roll musician, but the soundtrack is very French sounding. It's all accordions and instrumental, but it's really beautiful. And the film itself is stunning. It's really well directed. It's just a great film. I really love it.
I'm going to guess for other ones, I'm going to say maybe a musical. So Hamilton, would you count that as?
Yeah, I like Hamilton, but that's a musical. That's different.
All right, so different classification then. Something really nice, I think, something like Good Feeling, that kind of, maybe like a Wes Anderson. So a Wes Anderson.
I like Wes Anderson a lot.
I have a favorite film that is a Wes Anderson film. I wonder if it's the same
Grand
one.
Budapest Hotel?
Grand Budapest Hotel.
Because it's his best film. Did you just say it's the tits?
Yeah,
it is really good. Although I really quite liked the French Dispatch.
Yeah, we've disagreed on that because I wasn't as big a fan of it.
I don't think it's better than the Grand Budapest Hotel.
Yeah.
Because it's not. But it was a fun film. It was a really good film. I mean, it was a Wes Anderson film.
It was a bit of fun. The thing for Grand Budapest for me, and I think I bet a lot of people have had this similar thing. Even though I'd seen a Wes Anderson film before, like a couple before, I watched Grand Budapest Hotel and I was like, oh, I love Wes Anderson films. And then I watched like French Dispatch. I was like, I love the best Wes Anderson films.
Absolutely.
Like I love when he's at his best. I love that. I'm not quite into like him when he's not peaking. My second favorite Wes Anderson film is Fantastic Mr. Fox. I think that's great.
Yeah, it's cool.
That and then Isle of Dogs. So it's two animated films. But Fantastic Mr. Fox is so good. Like it's just
really well made.
It's got just a vibe about it, which is like really nice. A favorite joke in it, which I always tell people, is there's a joke where they're planning this like assault on one of the farms, and he's like, we've all like talk to all the animals underground. He's like, we've all got special skills that we can use to like, we can defeat like the farmers and whatever they're doing. And it's like, but you've all got these skills. Like, it's like, Rabbit, what's your special skill? It's like, I can dig. It's like, cool. It's like, someone else like, what's your skill? It's like, I can do this animal thing. It's like, great. And he turns to his friend Mole. It's like, what's your special skill? And the Mole's like, demolitions expert. It's just the timing
incredibly
of it.
Useful.
Yeah. It's like, what? It's like, oh, I can see in the dark. So yeah, prime example of that.
Yeah, so Wes Anderson's a big one. I like Wes Anderson. I like the Coen brothers a lot.
Yeah. No Country for Old Men.
No Country for Old Men is good.
Fantastic.
I love The Big Lebowski.
Yep, that's a great one.
And have you ever seen...
You are the dude.
Right?
Very close to the dude.
So... I don't know how big a crossover there is between people who listen to the podcast and people who come to my pub quiz. I host a pub quiz in person. That's another one of my hobbies. But I'm doing a special Halloween pub quiz, and I need to dress up for it, and I'm just going to dress up as the dude.
That's good. It's good.
And it's so funny because nobody who listens to the most people who listen to the podcast won't know what I look like. But I kind of look like a very slightly younger version of the dude.
Oh, yeah. You look like you could be in a Dude prequel.
Yeah, totally. Like, that's absolutely true. And I do love a White Russian.
I was going to say you're going to be drinking White Russians that night.
Well, I mean, it's a pub quiz, isn't it? So why not?
I mean, you kind of have to. If you're in a pub in that costume, it's like you got to bring the stuff to make White Russians.
Yeah, I mean, I'll make sure there's some Kahlua on hand. There'll be vodka, there'll be milk. It's fine.
Cherries, is that? I know those are the three ones. Is it common with the cherry?
No.
Okay. Oh, well, I got that from.
But I will put some in.
Sure. So films, yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't know if you would agree with this. One of my favorite ones is Good Will Hunting, and I
really love Good Will Hunting. I think it's a bit heavy-handed.
Oh yeah, it gets to like heavy areas, doesn't it?
But Robin Williams was fantastic.
I think it says best performance. People always go to like what's like Patch
It's
Adams
Matt Damon's best performance.
Oh yeah.
But that's not saying
written,
much, is it?
Yeah, and written, like the fact they wrote that, him and Affleck, like that's incredible. But yeah, that was one where I always knew about the plot of like the genius janitor because I'd seen it parodied in a bunch of stuff before. And then I got in late one night years and years ago, and it was on. I was kind of like, oh, I know of this. I was only like 10-15 minutes already in. I was like, I know of this film. Like, I'll leave it on and I'm interested in it. And I like stayed up till 3 a.m. just finishing it because I was just so engrossed in it. I was like, Jesus Christ, that was amazing.
Really special.
Yeah.
So there's a film that I really love that, again, it's one of those that like I've never met another person who liked it or had even heard of it. It's called The Station House or The Station Master. And it's like a really slow burny drama with Peter Dinklage as the star. So Peter Dinklage plays the lead, and essentially he is a guy who ran a toy store or like a model shop in New York. It gets left to him alongside the owner's property out in like Staten Island, like, kind of upstate New York.
Right.
And so he moves there to settle it up, and it's an old station house, like it's an old train station house. And he just meets a bunch of people and kind of lives in a slower way, and he's somebody from New York experiencing small town living for the first time. And it's just this really lovely film. It was like a film festival kind of film that never really took off. And it's always one that I recommend to people because it's like, I like a slow burn in a film. Which is weird because I have a short attention span, but I really like a slow burn.
I find there's a whole conversation about attention span stuff, and so it was actually Jimmy Carr and I think put it best where, because that conversation about like, oh, people are watching shorter things and strips or whatever, but it's like, but people also binge watching entire seasons of TV shows and hours and hours of podcasts, especially ours. Like, but so that I think it goes both ways. People either want to be engrossed in something and they'll consume hours of it if they can, or if it's not that level, they'll take the tiniest amount of interest if they can scroll past and get a new thing and a new thing. So it's two extremes, I think. The
other films that are like really special to me are like, so have you ever seen Inside Llewyn Davis?
I've heard of it. That's Oscar Isaacs, yeah.
And it's got a bunch of music by a musician that I love called Dave Van Ronk in it. He was like a Greenwich Village guy, and that's really special. I know there's more action films in your like list than there is mine.
Oh yeah, I've got some superhero shit in mine, absolutely. It'd be weird if I didn't.
Yeah, so that's actually a really interesting thing that brings us back on topic. Which are your favorite superhero films?
It's a difficult one because, I mean, I'm obviously a Marvel fanboy, so the MCU as a whole, like the biggest parts of that are some of my biggest film experiences. So, the first Avengers film, like, was such an unlikely thing to come together as well as it did.
Yeah.
So that's like the experience of that, like watching that going, oh my God, it's actually good. It's better than I expected.
I remember years ago, you, me, and our friend, you're going to have to bleep his name out, but you, me, and went to go and see, I think it was Infinity War together.
No, because you said that before, and I'm like, no, I saw that when I wasn't living here.
You, me, and
saw something.
Went to go see a Marvel film together.
Right. I don't remember which one that was.
It was one of the Avengers ones, because I remember...
Could have been Age of Ultron, potentially.
I can't remember which one it was, but I just remember your level of excitement far outstripped...
Your
but it was like, it was really nice to see you watch it, and I think it was the point at which I realised how important the Marvel films were to people.
Oh yeah, it's the fact that they was coming off so well, because especially like at that point, we'd had some good superhero films, but a lot of bad ones as well. So the fact that these characters who people loved were getting, a good adaptation of film was just like, I think people were just like so relieved that they were good.
Yeah.
It's why now there's such a struggle with the bad ones that have come out more recently, and it's why there's this constant thing of a bad one comes out, it's like, the MCU's dead, it's all over, and then a good one comes out, it's like, we're back, we're so back. And it's just that constantly.
That constant cycle of
exactly, yeah.
Sort of elation and depression, rinse, repeat.
Yeah. I think in terms of the it's a most basic bitch answer, but I cannot help it. Like, can't deny it's true. The Dark Knight is probably it's definitely one of my favorites. Yeah, no. So first one was Batman Begins, and then it was Dark Knight with Joker and.
So the Dark Knight's the second one of the trilogy.
Yes, with Heath Ledger, Joker, and
is Heath Ledger's Joker not in the first one?
No, it's Ra's al Ghul played by Liam Neeson.
Oh, yeah. I've not watched it in a long time.
Yeah, it came out fucking over a decade ago. But it's such a basic bitch answer. It's like, it's the white millennial dude. It's like, what's your favorite film? Dark Knight. Like, it's that joke. But
it was good, wasn't it? I mean,
yeah, it was fantastic.
And I suppose at the time, because then the third one had Bane in it, right?
Yes, Tom Hardy Bane.
That one.
Yes. You were merely born in the darkness. You were adopted. I said you were born, but you adopted the darkness. I was the one who was born in the darkness. Yeah,
Tom Hardy was fantastic in that role.
He was good, yeah.
Tom Hardy's kind of good in everything, though.
Yeah, he's pretty good in most things, I'd say. I don't think I've seen a bad performance by him. But
have you watched the film about the Krays?
Oh, yeah, Legend. I haven't seen the film, but I've seen
clips. Have you not seen Legend?
No, but I've seen clips from it. I've seen him. He's acting in it.
Have you seen the scene where he plays both brothers as they're having a fight?
Yeah, I've seen those scenes.
With each other?
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
He's so, like, that's weirdly, a film about London gangsters and murder is like a comfort food thing for me. So if I'm
extra British, and he's like, you fucking what? Like,
yeah, and you know this. I'm quite parochial in that sense. I like British things.
Yeah.
I like
when
English
the American
accents.
like, you want a knuckle sandwich?
Do you want a knuckle sandwich, guy?
Yeah. Hey, buddy.
My name's Chad Hosner. Like, it's just, no.
Me and Dwight are going to kick your ass.
There's something about British accents that I find comforting.
Yeah. Makes you feel of home.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, being threatened in a British accent makes me feel like I'm at home.
Yeah. And have to mention, if we're talking about best superhero films, Spider-Man 2 just fucking nailed it
because
in a lot of ways.
It's fucking great.
Yeah, fantastic.
It's fantastic. And Tobey Maguire was like so good in that role.
Yeah, so glad he's back. He's definitely coming back again for Secret Wars, I reckon.
Is
him and Garfield.
he?
It's not confirmed. I reckon. There's a strong reckon. Like,
what? Because it's so interesting because the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man films are quite unloved, aren't they?
Yeah, they're not very good. He's good in them, but they're not very good. They're bad films in terms of writing. Like, they're really
not
poor.
seen them.
Yeah, don't bother.
Have I seen them?
Maybe we will one day.
No, I think I have. I've seen the first one at least because I remember thinking, bad film, good actor.
If it clears up, at no point was he riding a motorcycle. That helps at all.
That's a deep cut.
From like 2 weeks ago.
Have you seen Tick Tick Boom with him in it
Yes,
yet?
that's fantastic.
Isn't it great?
Yeah. I occasionally will play the song 3090.
Yeah.
Great song.
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, Tick Tick Boom is directed by Lin-Manuel Miranda, who wrote Hamilton. who also scored Moana, by the way. People forget that. And it's based on an early musical by John Larson, who wrote Rent.
Yes.
And it's really fucking good.
It's based on his life. Pre-Rent.
Yeah, so it's absolutely. So he'd written this sort of really interesting dystopian musical that has essentially come true. Where people are like, they have these devices, it's like set in space, but people have these small computer-like devices that they try and use to get famous, and they're all vying for their 15 minutes of fame, and it's all very on the nose for what's happening right now.
And people are like, that's too unrealistic. You can't make that.
Exactly, yeah. And then within 25, 30 years, it actually happened. And he'd just finished that and it hadn't gone anywhere. And this is the musical that he wrote around that time.
Because he was turning 30.
He was turning 30. It's interesting, isn't it, that there's sort of two great, really iconic pieces of like musical storytelling about turning 30.
And speaking of music,
John Larson's Rent John Larson's Tick Tick Boom set against the backdrop of AIDS. And then Bo Burnham's Inside.
Yeah, that's
written during the pandemic.
I've been rewatching Bo Burnham stuff recently as well. If you like Bo Burnham stuff,
I'm the greatest rapper ever.
Look up his appearance on the Green Room. If you search Bo Burnham Green Room, it's really great. It's a show with like just a bunch of comedians talking, but it's him and a bunch of older comedians.
Yeah.
And you can see him winning them all over. Because at that point, he was the internet famous young comedian who just started doing clubs without kind of paying his dues and, you know, that kind of stuff. And like one of the older comedians is Mark Maron. And you can see Mark Maron like, so he realized like, oh, he's legit. Like he's funny. He's rebutting. Like there's a joke where he points out one of the first internet comments he ever got was go gadget, slow word for gay people. Like, and
that's awful.
Yeah. And he says like, someone says like, it's not necessarily negative. Like it sounds like it's like, you know, like promoting you, like go ahead kind of thing. And then Mark Maron goes, yeah, and I meant it that way when I wrote it. So,
nice.
That like kind of back and forth. But then at one point, Bo Burnham's talking about an obscure Swedish or German comedian he likes, about a guy who puts like a white sock on his hand, or a black sock on his hand, and like feeds it biscuits, whatever. Mark Maron's like, I hate this already. And Bo was like, oh, fair enough. It's a white sock then. Like, so Mark was like, he's got me. So it's really cool for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But speaking of musicals and films, I thought this was something I wanted to mention. Joker 2 is out in box office right now.
Right.
The one that was Joker 1 was like the highest grossing R-rated film ever at one point.
Was it?
Yeah, it only recently got beat by Deadpool Wolverine, but it was the highest grossing R-rated film.
Everyone fucking loved it.
Yeah. And now Joker 2 is one of the worst performing, biggest box office bombs of all time.
No shit.
Panned by critics and audience.
Well, I'm so glad we did a fucking SEO tie-in for
we were going to do Killing Joke at some point anyway, so
it gave us an opportunity to talk about Alan Moore.
But it's being talked about, so like, you know, same thing essentially. But it's just so funny that the first one wasn't a musical, and then now the second one is a musical, despite the fact the director Todd Phillips insists it's not a musical.
Wait, is it a musical?
It's a musical. The second one is a musical. Yeah.
Is it full of songs?
Yeah, they sing songs. Lady Gaga plays Harley Quinn, and they got her because there's singing in it.
But wasn't Margot Robbie already Harley Quinn in the first one?
No. Margot Robbie was the Harley Quinn in the Suicide Squad films.
Oh, I thought she did it in that as well.
No, not in that one.
Oh.
No, there's no Harley Quinn. So there's the problem. My problem with that Joker film, I enjoyed it a bit, but it's barely a Joker film. It's a Joker film in name only. Like, he calls himself the Joker. And there's like Wayne family stuff in his set in Gotham. If you took all those out, it would be a film completely on its own. Like,
what was it about?
It's about a guy who goes crazy from society, from being kicked down by society, and then he goes mental, and he becomes a center figure for representation of chaos and rioting and that kind of thing. And that's why he's so dangerous and all that. And it's Taxi Driver meets King of Comedy. 2 De Niro films. And De Niro's in it.
Well, is he?
Yeah, but
Taxi Driver's a fucking great film.
Yeah, but imagine a worse version of that where they just make it the Joker for no reason.
Yeah.
Like, that's what that is.
Yeah.
But the reason it's bombing now is because the second one's a musical and it's so unlike the first one. So the problem is like, if you like...
core audience,
if you like the first one, you're not going to like the second one. And if you like the second one, if you're the kind of person who would like the second one, you're probably not even going to see it because you didn't like the first one.
Yeah,
like it's so different.
Idea,
like there's no point doing this.
Creative. I mean, creatively though, it's it's cool that they took a gamble. It's cool that they went, fuck it, should we make a musical set in the Batman universe? And somebody greenlit that. Somebody went, yeah, I'll pay for that.
Yep, but unfortunately, it means they're losing an estimated, roughly, give or take, about $300 million.
Oh, is that how much they've lost?
So the rule I've heard is with like...
So that's our Human Target film that we don't get now?
Nah, because it's different. Because it's this is James Gunn stuff. If anything, this emboldens James Gunn stuff because it's like that's so far from the comic sources. Yeah, James Gunn is like a comic book nerd who makes great comic book films. So if anything, they're going to be like, give the people what they want, give them the comic, give them the costumes, give them the everything. Because Joker was so far from.
Was the Batman even in it?
No. He had a young Bruce Wayne who it's basically a cameo at some point. And there's a storyline about how...
A young Bruce Wayne singing.
No, in the pre-musical, the non-musical. He might, I haven't seen the second one, so he might be in it. I don't think he is though.
Terrible idea.
Yeah, it's awful. We'll watch Joker at some point for get your reaction as content. Yeah. But yeah, I thought it was just funny. The general rule of thumb with film seems to be whatever the budget was for making the film, it's normally double for the marketing. Like that's like a base give or take rule of thumb. Like because if they put X amount in it that way, they'll put that in again to try and get their return on it.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah. And so because it had a 200 million budget, it's roughly probably going to be about another 200 million for marketing and stuff. And it's only maybe about to make 100 million back, which is like massively underperforming.
So it costs 200 mil to make.
Yeah.
Which means they probably spent 400 million marketing it, which means 200
million marketing it, so 400 million total.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I thought you just said
so double it to include marketing.
Right. Sorry, I thought you meant if they spent 200 mil making it, they would spend 400 mil marketing it for a total 600 mil.
Yeah, no. Normally just the same amount again.
So. Right, okay. Fuck, that's a lot of money, isn't it?
Yeah. And this is the problem. Studios put all this money in. It's like they don't know what they're fucking doing. Like,
no, and this. I've been thinking about this a lot recently. Because cinema now is so expensive. Even indie films cost a lot of money to make. It means that you can't take risks. And like, I would be well up for like a cottage industry of really cheaply made films that didn't look that great. Because people could take more risks. I suppose that's kind of what YouTube is, isn't it?
If anything, I would say I think indie films are actually not booming, but I think they're doing well. And I think the reason they're doing well is because cinemas are now less populated. Like there's less films playing in cinemas. Yeah. I saw this in a Kevin Smith interview because he was talking about this. Less or fewer. I've heard it both ways. And Kevin Smith talks about this where he said indie filmmakers is now much easier for them to get their films into cinemas because cinemas are just like
there's less competition.
Yeah, like you want to play a film, like here's a lower rate than you would have got before, and we can actually fit you in, kind of thing. So, and I think there's still people who want to be filmmakers, and they just get it off the ground on a smaller budget, and those are the ones that are more creatively interesting because they make shortcuts to get around their smaller budgets, and like even going like there are people doing it nowadays. Even going back to the bloody days of Kevin Smith's first Clerks film was shot in black and white.
Oh my god, I saw a photograph of like his budget for it, and it was like
he took out on credit cards.
I know,
the entire
it's
budget.
Crazy, isn't it?
If it hadn't have worked out for him, he would have just been in debt for the rest of his life. And luckily it did.
Because the amount of money he took out was a very, very small amount of money to make a film, but a huge amount of debt.
Yes. It's there's a thing about getting older. It's like maturity is when you realise that £1,000 is not a lot of money to have, but it's a lot to owe.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, very different values depending on if you have it versus whether you owe it.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah. So Joker 2 doing horribly. Thought that was funny. The biggest joke of it all, I guess. Just feel sorry for Joaquin Phoenix. Maybe he's a bad bloke. I don't know.
Dude.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe. Well, we don't know him. Parasocial relationship and all that. But
again, I like that Johnny Cash film, and I like that Her film.
People are saying he's good in it. I think that's what I've seen from reviews. Like people like his performance. Yeah. They just don't like the overall film. The overall film is shocking. Yeah.
But I suppose this is the problem because I imagine he probably would have signed on for more than one film, right? And so he signed on to be in this hugely popular film, and then they were like, "By the way, the sequel's a musical," and he's like, "Fuck."
I've heard rumors of the opposite. I've heard that he was up for the first one, but he was only up for doing one, and then I think he was only contracted for one. And because of it was a surprise success how well that first one did. I think they backed the money truck up to him. Probably part of that played $200 million budget. It's probably a big chunk of that was just him, because they just needed him back for a second one. Yeah. So I don't think he wanted to do it. I think he only agreed to do it if they could do more creative, risky stuff. I'm not saying he demanded it being a musical. I'm not saying that at all. But I think what appealed to him to do because he's not a sequel guy. He doesn't do sequels of stuff.
No.
So I think the reason what got him back for this rare sequel of his was they were like, oh, it's going to be really different.
He's
like,
a character actor, isn't he?
I think they were like, we're going to make it really different. We're going to, take creative risks. It's not going to be a boring sequel. So I think that was part of how they got him in the door back for a sequel in the first place.
Yeah, Joaquin Phoenix is an interesting one. I see what you're saying. That makes a lot of sense, because he's sort of a character actor who's ended up being a leading man.
Yeah, he definitely said at one point that Joke was just a one and done. Like, he definitely said that. And then they created their sequel. So, yeah.
Well, I'm glad it bombed.
Yeah, it's funny.
It's funny. It's amusing.
Big studios losing money, always funny.
Yeah,
always hilarious. And it's not a franchise that I care about, so it's even funnier.
Absolutely, it can go fuck itself.
Yeah.
But sorry, Joaquin Phoenix, because I do like most of your other work.
Yeah, we like your stuff.
Yeah, the other stuff you've done that I've seen, I've liked. I'm giving you a thumbs up.
I like you in the first Joke film, because I've seen that one, and you were good in that.
I like you in the Johnny Cash film.
Yeah, I like Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story.
We've talked about this on the podcast
last week. All right, we're repeating ourselves now, so let's not be creatively bankrupt and
absolutely.
Let's rather end the podcast episode rather than doing that.
Yeah, that was a fun little freeform half hour though.
Yeah. Little jazz.
Let us know if you liked it, because we'll do that more often.
And tell us your favourite Junji Ito horrifying image that left you with nightmares.
Even better, post it in the chat.
I'll post it in the Facebook chats.
Yeah. So thank you so much for listening. We have a Facebook group. Leave us reviews. I'm not going to do too many calls to action today because it's been a long episode. So thank you.
You say that every week.
Thank you and goodbye.
I'm going to start limiting these episodes to 1 hour and then give you a half an hour call to action at the end.
That can go fuck itself.
Tune in next week to find out how that goes.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.